Colleagues, can I just ask us now, we have the Chief Officer Group back with us. The next item on the agenda, the minutes of the previous meeting, which are item 8. Can I just run through those first of all for accuracy? On pages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13. If you're content with those, are you happy as I sign them as a true record of the meeting? Thank you. And then there are, I think, just 2 actions. John, if you could take us through those.
In terms of that feedback, I think that's been done during the...
Feedback to staff?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. And the other item is on the agenda.
On the agenda, fine. Thank you very much indeed. So that can take us through then to item 9, which is public access, and I don't believe we've had any requests for public access to this meeting. So I'll move on then to the announcements from both myself and the Chief Constable. And we've already heard this morning that this is the last AGM of the Police Authority, but I want to stress it's not the last meeting of the Police Authority. We retain all our statutory duties until the 22nd of November, and we intend to exercise all our duties properly until that time and conduct all appropriate business. And there are some important things that we need to do, like finalising the PFI contract and finalising a number of collaboration agreements that will help both this force and other forces. And I want to give an assurance to the public that nothing will be rushed through and nothing will be delayed. We will do these tasks properly. But today, in particular, the authorities meeting is about preparing to pass on a legacy to the incoming commissioner, and I think most importantly to the public, whose interests should be uppermost in this. Assuming that we approve everything today, we'll adopt a transition style of working from today's onwards, which I hope will help both the constabulary and the authority staff pave the way for the commissioner's arrival. We also plan to approve today some legacy reports from all of the work areas that the authorities engaged in, and we'll publish those both to inform the candidates and the wider public of where we stand in the activities and the work that we're doing, and also setting out what we see as important areas of work that's on the horizon and that shouldn't be ignored in the future, in our view. But if I summarise those and all the other reports that we'll see, particularly the performance report, today will show a policing service to our public that's improved very substantially over recent years. And it'd be, I think, utterly wrong for me or we as an authority to lay claim to that improvement. It's down to the Chief Constable and the Chief Officer team and to all of the people in the service. I think both the so-called frontline and particularly those that provide the vital backup that they require. It is a solid team performance. But what I would like to claim is that the governance of this authority over the last few years and the bold decision-making that we have taken has both simultaneously held to account the force and enabled the force to achieve the position that it's got to today. And I'm very proud of that. And you'll hear that in the performance report, many areas of service, we're doing incredibly well. There's the highest ever detection rate for crime, the lowest ever crime rate in Bristol in recent times. And all of this has been done delivering fully the financial cuts required from us from central government, and that's been dealt with in a mature and strategic way. And I think the force has dealt very well with the major changes that has imposed on them. And certainly if you look at the reviews that HMIC have carried out on that, we have been the word congratulations never appears, of course, but they have supported fully the strategic approach that's been taken. So, if the combination of leadership and workforce is so good, why isn't Avon and Somerset right at the top of the tree? And I will say that that is entirely because this force area is robbed of resources that the government itself assesses that we actually need, but they take away to give to other forces over and above their assessed actual need. And this robbery takes £20 million a year from this force, and we've lost over £100 million in total so far. And compare that with the £42 million that we have to save under austerity measures. We're losing double what we need to on top of that because of the arithmetic of the damping formula. So that's 10% of our central grant we lose, and that money is transferred to other forces, some of whom are getting 30%, nearly 30% of their over and above their assessed needs, and they're building up major cash reserves as a consequence of that. Now, as you're well aware, I mention this regularly. I've raised it with the policing minister, and anybody else who's been prepared to listen. And I'm pleased to say that there is some movement to the extent that the government has launched a consultation now as to how damping can be removed. We are not alone in this. Many of our local authority colleagues, and particularly North Somerset, find themselves in the same position, and we intend to work closely together both to respond to the policing consultation and to raise the issue on behalf of the residents of Avon and Somerset directly as much as we can. What I fear, of course, is that in a public consultation, in the way that this goes on, where there are winners and losers, the government will see half of the people winning and half of the people losing, say it's all too hard to solve, and I don't want to see that happen. So, as well as preparing and sending in our formal response, we're launching an e-petition today so that the people of Avon and Somerset can register their disapproval and perhaps even their anger of the fact that they're losing so much resource. It's equivalent to 450 officers that could be out there that aren't, or it's equivalent to nearly £40 that they could have back off their council tax bills if that money weren't taken and given to other forces. So I think we have the chance of moving things forward, and I hope that all prospective police commissioner candidates will support the communities of Avon and Somerset in getting what they actually deserve by way of funding. And of course it'll make a massive difference to an incoming commissioner in terms of the raw resources they can command to deliver good policing in this area. It won't affect this authority directly, but it will affect every law-abiding citizen in Avon and Somerset, and I want it to be another part of our long-lasting and proud legacy. Thank you. Colin, I turn to you to make your Chief Constable's remarks.
Importantly, members may note that two of our colleagues received awards in Her Majesty's Honours, birthday honours. Nick Eckland received a QPM, Queen's Police Medal, and John Wood received an MBE. Both well deserved. John for 40 years volunteering over 40 years volunteering as a member of the Special Constabulary, and Nick for his work particularly with young people, which is really, really important for us, as you very well know, and you share our concerns regarding that. Also, within the last week, we've had two long service and good conduct medal ceremonies. Both were represented by the Police Authority. Wonderful events to celebrate commitment of police staff, of police officers and members of the Special Constabulary. And I'm really pleased the Police Authority were there to be represented. Also, over the last month, we've launched Clean Slate, which, as you'll be aware, is the variation on Live and Unsigned. And the heats are taking place of artwork throughout the whole of the force area, and having seen some of it, it's really wonderful, and we're delighted that the Royal West of England Academy will host that for us during July, a real, again, celebration of what young people do, as opposed to what some people think they do. The next part of my announcements, and I have passed the operational announcements around, will sound a bit like a valedictory speech. It's not meant to be, but I think, like Peter, this is the last AGM, and I think it would be remiss of me as the Chief Constable, as representative of all of the members of Avon Somerset Constabulary, not to articulate our views about the police authority and the contribution that you have made. The histories of police authorities or police governance goes back a long time, even before I was born. But we had watch committees. Watch committees were thrown out. We had police committees. They went, and now we've got police authorities, and they're moving on to police and crime commissioners. The government have decided that's what's going to happen, and we'll work with the police and crime commissioners, and I think there's a big challenge ahead for them. But one of the great things about this authority in the past is you've been able to separate the role of the executive and policing. And that's one of the great things about our constitution. Those were remain separately, and the tripartite arrangement of the Home Secretary, the Police Authority and the Chief Constable, I think, has worked really well. And I think you're to be congratulated upon the role that you take, the views that you articulate. Lots of you are here because you're elected representative, and I think that's great. But when you come here, you represent the whole of Avon and Somerset, and very rarely does it enter into sort of a debate around your particular area. But I recognise you're very proud of your particular areas, and quite rightly as well. Rob will talk about the performance improvements, and we've deliberately taken a different line to show what you have helped us achieve. And that might sound sycophantic, but I think it's important. It's important for the public to recognise, as Peter alluded to, the contribution that the police authorities have made over the years. We've had the amalgamation debate, and you and your predecessors on this authority remained stalwart and recognised that was the government wish, and you went ahead with it, and then it was dropped. We've had the collaboration issues. You of the police authorities have taken the lead in terms of Zephyr, in terms of Brunel, in terms of the West Coast Forensic Science collaboration. You've also been brave in relation to South West 1. Lots of other authorities looked at it and frankly didn't have the bravery that you had. But South West 1, as you'll hear later on, is delivering procurement savings for us. It is saving jobs. And actually it's allowed us to think in a different way when we look around the country and we look at the losses of jobs that have occurred in other police services. They're not happening here, thank goodness. You've allowed us to invest in ICT. Julian earlier on talked about the paper system that was here when I came. You've allowed us to invest in an IT system. And then in the lack of central direction, you took the brave step to invest in Guardian and its brothers and sisters. So therefore you've moved in relation to that. You've been brave in relation to PFI, in relation to the Bridewell and the investment that you've put in there, in relation to Concord House. Importantly, vitally importantly, you were brave in relation to the Sexual Assault Referral Centre. We're one of the largest cities in the country, and yet we didn't have a Sexual Assault Referral Centre. But we've seen the results of that in terms of victim care, of looking at victims, as well as tracking down and prosecuting predatory males. We've seen the investment that you've put in impact as well, and we've heard a little about that from Julian this morning, and the work led by John, but also the support that you have given us to drive that through, because lots of people saw that as negative, a bit soft, but it's not soft, and anybody who knows anything about impact knows how strong it is and how strong it can be. So you're leading a great legacy. You've been challenging, you've been testing, you've been supportive, you've been scrutinising, and quite rightly, you've held me to account and you've held my colleagues to account. But as I say, and I mentioned it 4 times deliberately, you've been brave. When police officers talk about policing, we talk about the job. You know that policing is far more important, is far different from just a job. It's a vocation. And I truly believe, during my service, I recognise the authorities have actually, don't look at it as a job, don't look at it as a burden, you actually look at it as a vocation. And I, my fellow officers, My colleagues who aren't here today would like to say thank you very much for what you have done.
Thank you very much, Colin. That's very kind. Thank you. Can we move on then to paper 11, which is the forced performance report, which I think Rob will take us through. Do you want to just have a little pause here and we'll get rid of the cameras and the microphone. Thank you very much. Just remind, we are still being filmed for purposes of the sort of public dissemination of this. We're not actually web streaming, but it will be available on the web. But that's now the end of the filming by the BBC. Rob, back to you for paper.
I'm glad the filming's continuing because I did wash my hair this morning. We won't go any further on that one. As the Chief Constable's pointed out, the paper does take you back a little bit further than normal, and it does take us back to the start of what could be described as the transformation programme. Whether we called it quite that in those days is more debatable, but certainly that's our ambition was to drive up performance. And if you remember, at that point, we set our ambition as being top quartile. And you know, if you reflect and on some of the debates at that time, there was a real question mark over, was this wholly unrealistic? Could we truly achieve top quartile performance? You know, because most of our positions nationally were in the bottom quartile at that point. And it's worth reflecting on that. When we discussed some of the legacy reports at the Performance and Audit Committee, members themselves actually did say that the word driven might not be appropriate for the authorities' work, because actually, you know, on the whole, the constabulary does the actual technical work behind. But the other words that we used were absolutely relevant, and that was about driving, encouraging, challenging, irritating. And there's no doubt that at times you have been very hard on us around some of our performance, and I reflect back on very uncomfortable discussions about our rape detection rate that was 18% and is now 38%. I remember a discussion when our detection rate was just about 20%, and you were asking about Guardian and how would you guarantee that our investment in Guardian did actually improve detection rates, which we were arguing it would. And this was from a base where we had started at 16.8% for our detection rate, and we're now today at 36.4%. We're 12th nationally now, as of the most recent iQuanta figures, and we were about 38th. So the relative performance is very clear in terms of that. And I remember sort of indicating, well, I think Guardian might put 2 or 3% on it. And the reality of it is that Guardian's just the tool. The delivery of those detections, those crimes that have been solved for people in the community, has been through investigation, crime management, the appropriate steps taken by officers, that's been very much supported by the authority. The crime reduction figures, I'm always been very cautious about, as members will know, about claiming credit for crime reduction, because there's so many other factors always involved. But for this force, you might remember the dark ages when we were, when Avon in particular was highlighted as being the car crime capital of Europe, and burglaries as well took us to bottom, one of the worst in the country for our rates. Those crime rates have come down by 60%. 60%. And I mean, that's you know, and way surpassing other forces there. Our crime rates in general are down, total crime rates are down by 30%. And I think that describes, you know, that there are tens of thousands of less victims in Avon and Somerset now than there were. You have been extraordinarily supportive of the development of neighbourhood policing, and out of that, the work around antisocial behaviour. All forces were a little bit behind the game on tackling antisocial behaviour, but we've and you supported this force in being one of the very few to measure the satisfaction of antisocial behaviour victims. 2 years ago, that was about 65%, and again, the most recent figures show us that 85% satisfaction rates from people who report antisocial behaviour. Nationally, the report will come out tomorrow. It's an HMIC report. They'll never pat you on the head. It reads a bit mealy-mouthed. And they say the force has made significant progress, but they also say that they could do better about identifying repeat and vulnerable victims. You will read, when you read that, you think, oh, well, actually, that's a significant issue. This force came top in the country for actually identifying repeat and vulnerable victims. We identified it more than any other force in our processes and the way stuff was answered. So when it comes out tomorrow, it will read a bit sort of glass half empty. But when you actually look at it in the context of the other the whole national picture, our work on antisocial behaviour really has been hitting the mark, and that's been enormously supported by the authority. And the Chief Constable's mentioned many of the initiatives and the work that's driven the satisfaction, the crime levels, the detection levels, and perhaps and the one that's always very difficult to know how you influence it is the confidence one. That's a random survey of people in the area about whether the police are doing a good job. And we're 7th highest nationally now, having been about at one point 38th also for that. And we've shifted 13.5 percentage points in the past 7 years. So, and again, that's a mixture of the work we do and the reputation and the tone that gets set. So against, you know, that's and in many of those figures, the confidence, the satisfaction, and the crime figures are now actually in the top quartile. But and I reflect on many of the challenges of the authority, and it has been around not being complacent. And the one thing we absolutely are not is complacent. We have set the challenge of being first nationally for the satisfaction people have when they report crime. You've seen one or two of the figures that are in the paper today that show us actually tailing off in the last few months of public satisfaction, i.e. those who've reported crimes. It's great to be able to report actually that hasn't particularly affected our national position, because other forces have as well, and so it does show how those national trends and things can also affect us. But we do believe we could be first nationally for the satisfaction the victims of crime have when they report crime to us, and we can certainly still improve on many of those results. And you know, our commitment as a legacy to yourselves, but also to whoever follows, is that we will continue driving the performance, not for the figures and not to be top quartile just for its sake, but for the benefit of the residents in Avon and Somerset. I don't think Alan's here today to...
No, he isn't, unfortunately. Alan obviously would normally make some opening remarks, but from the chair I would say that I would echo very much what Rob has said. There have been some moments in performance and audit from times, but that robust debate actually helps both sides to drive where we are and all of that. But I'd throw open the report for any questions or comments from the authority. John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think congratulations all round are due for the there's obviously a huge improvement in the figures over the last few years. Being a sort of glass half empty person myself, I think it does. You know, I do have to say that although there have been dramatic improvements, and I think we recognise that, even the top performing police force in the country at the moment has got about a 50% detection rate. So, you know, in the eyes of the general public, a criminal's got a 50% chance of getting away with it. And even in Somerset, a criminal's got probably a 60% chance, or slightly over % chance of getting away with the crime they commit. And although there have been significant improvements, I think we need, in my view anyway, we need to get to a position where a criminal has an expectation of being caught, rather than currently they would still have an expectation of getting away with it the majority of the time. And you know, that's where I would like to see the figures going. So we have, instead of 60% getting away with it, we have 60% being caught and 30% getting away with it. And you know, that may be a panacea somewhere down the line, but I think that's the sort of figures we should be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody in the room would agree with you,
Yeah.
John, on all that. I've got Pete and then Tim.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to take the opportunity to echo Rob's point with regards to the initiatives being undertaken by the Constabulary with regards to antisocial behaviour. Certainly identifying repeat and vulnerable victims. This is hugely important to the members of the public, and this is something that affects their lives in such a huge way. And I would also like to congratulate the Constabulary and the local authorities on that partnership working and involving other partners. And long may that continue. Thank you.
Tim.
Must say Pete for Crime Commission, right? I got it out, Pete.
That's my campaign manager.
I forgot where I was now. Glass half full here, John. With police detection rates, I might be right, I might be wrong, but you detect, we say 40%, because that's easy to work with, and 60% are undetected. How many of those 60% of crimes do you think are perpetrated by the same people that actually been nobbled for the 40%? So although they're not detective crimes, the person might be locked up for a different crime.
Our focus for reducing crime has been very much on the integrated offender management and tackling the offenders and making sure we identify them in the first place, and then absolutely doing everything to take them off at the pass and to make sure that they're either locked up or diverted. And I think it's fair to say, and when we try and avoid shouting too much about locks and people making the houses fortresses and things like that, it has to be about the people. You've got to make the offenders put them on the back foot. So there's no doubt that all the statistics tell us that it's a certain number of people, 20% that commit 80% of the crime. And so they're the people you have to be after. It's the same with antisocial behaviour as well. It's often the same individuals or the people that cause the problems in the same places, at the same locations, often to many of the same victims as well. So the focus on those victims, offenders and location has been very, we've been very tight on. So yes, and it will remain those individuals who we think are committing the crime. It's the ones we don't know. They're the ones we've still got to hunt down, try and find out about all the intelligence. And I was reflecting actually on John's point. Ultimately, it's working with the communities. It's actually everyone being on our side and working with us that makes a difference. And my personal view about a lot of our work is that we've managed to develop a virtuous circle around particularly neighbourhood policing has enhanced that, but so does integrated offender management, a number of other initiatives. That virtuous circle that gives us intelligence, identifies the people, then the public then starts supporting us more, give us the intelligence, identify the people. And the 50% detection rate, which absolutely I'm up for, will be delivered, but not just by us, it will be delivered with the community.
Shazia.
Rob, just looking at the diversity scorecard, on the stop search disproportionality ratio seems to have gone down to 2.3, and it's been quite static at about 4, hasn't it? 4.1 over the last 10 years. I just wonder why that is.
Yes, in fact, and it's a point. Actually, I was a bit remiss in not identifying some of the diversity work as well, because some of our hate crime detection rates
Are
were
excellent.
some of the lowest
That's right.
again in the UK, and that's been driven up enormously. We've done some of the work and improved work around certainly stop and search has actually been through improved intelligence, just better targeting, which follows the point that we were discussing with Tim about trying to get the right people and not just randomly stop and search. And if you're focusing it against the people you're more aware of and know, then you will get the right people. But what we tried to avoid is a big knee-jerk response, and to try and keep our focus on it. And a lot of the work's been done in Bristol, and I take credit to John and to Rod, who's led a lot of that work in that respect. Because the one thing Chief Constable alluded to it, that a lot of these measures often absolutely cross-cut the different portfolios, and different people have had a quite significant hand in those different things. But the Qualities Working Group, I would say, has never let up on this.
I won't let up.
Thank you. I would just like to make, Alan unfortunately can't be here, but one of the things that's been very interesting over the last 2 or 3 years has been the debate around targets. I mean, when I took over the chair, I think the Police Authority was setting now on 50 targets, and that translated to thousands of targets beneath that, and we're often debating whether the detection rate should be 20.2 or 20.4 or whatever. But the trajectory has always moved that way, and I would draw people's attention to the Annex A in here that shows the satisfaction rates. And again, in addressing some of the comments that John's made and Rob's response, every single person who's a victim of crime would like burglar bill locked up the next morning and dealt with within 24 hours. And sometimes that can't happen. But one of the things that we have done together is debate how you measure how well the force is doing, and moving to the so-called soft targets, the ones that sometimes we've taken criticism for not being entirely smart, but the satisfaction and confidence. What this does show is us roaring ahead compared with other forces there, that even if you can't detect everything, and even if you can't make sure that every criminal is locked up, people in Avon and Somerset are getting more and more satisfied with the whole process that they experience from the police, and their confidence in the police is rising. And I think that tests the weakest link in the chain rather than the huge quantitative analysis of whether you've got 20.4, 20.5. And I think that's also a testimony in a way which the forces has started to look holistically at what it delivers by way of service, and you can see the consequences of that. So, Colin, I think you wanted to make some remarks as well.
Yeah, just to summarise on this. Lots of you have heard me say, and it's not my quote, but it's a really important quote, and that's policing is too important to be left to the police. It's not just about the police, the special constables, our police staff, about the police authority. It's about partners. It's about our community. Last week I did a phone-in on Radio Bristol, and overwhelmingly, everyone who was ringing in was supportive of the police, supportive of what we're trying to do. There was one person who wasn't, and he was supportive of the police, but he just wasn't supportive of me. That's fine, I don't mind that. I mean, he's probably been wrong before. But in all seriousness, it is about our communities. And when we're seeing numbers of police officers and numbers of staff reducing, then it becomes really, really important that we continue to engage with our communities. Because no matter how good the figures are, if someone's making your life hell next door to you, it doesn't make any difference what I say or what we say or what they read in the papers. It's actually making their life hell. And those are the important people. And it's not just about the police being there, it's about communities being there for communities. And that's the great thing about Britain. One of the other great things about the police is that we don't work with a code of judicial instructions. We don't have to take people before magistrates. We can actually use our discretion. And that's enshrined in our constitution, as is the separation from police and the executive. As you can see, I've been looking at constitutional law quite recently. You may wonder why. I think it's vitally important that police officers continue to use their discretion, but fundamentally work with our communities to make our communities safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. If there are no other comments, and I'll move on to paper 12. Getting close to my heart again, and Mark, I'll ask you to introduce this one.
Before I talk about damping, Peter, as this is the last AGM, I just wanted to say thank you to my colleague on the left, Elena, who's put together the papers for the Police Authority over the last 3 or so years and done the minutes so well, and wish her all the best in her forthcoming maternity leave.
Which we hope won't happen for the next 3 hours.
If you could hold on.
Come on, Mark, hurry up.
Peter's already trailed this, so I won't add much, just to explain what the consultation was. The Police Finance Unit has written to Police Authority Treasurers and to the Constabulary as well, and it's an informal consultation on damping. I've replied already on behalf of the authority, and some of you have seen the reply, and it's here. I responded as vigorously as I could, that Peter and John would allow me to, and so I think they only took it down 1 or 2 clicks, and this is the response that went back in. I think, in summary, we were asked to say about damping, we were given 3 options. Should it be applied in the same way as previously? Should it be applied in a different way, or should it be phased out altogether? Our response was phased out. I won't repeat everything Peter said, but just the reason it should be phased out is it's gone on too long. It was always meant to be a transitional arrangement. It's created unexpected, polarised outcomes where a few forces lose an awful lot of money and a few forces gain an awful lot of money. It isn't scientifically applied. It's a fudge factor that has no relation to need whatsoever. Therefore, the forces that are losing, their funding is deviating drastically from what they're assessed to need from central grant funding. So I don't know how this will go. I think the consultation will get effect. I've talked to other treasurers. I think most are intending to respond. I've helped all the other treasurers on the left-hand side of the graph with the information and data that we've already got, so they can put that in their responses. And I'm sure that the Constabulary will also respond in kind from their side as well. So I haven't got anything else to add unless there are any questions.
No, clearly there will be vested interests coming in from the right-hand side of the graph, and we need to do as much as we can, and as much public support we can get will be Julian.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to really say that my thanks to Mark, because a bit like the Constabulary's position, you have to go it alone on these things because of the polarisation that we talk about. So we can't expect the APA or ACPO to have a particular view that supports ours, because they have to represent all of the forces, some of which are better served than others. But I did think that we've been on a quest now for a good number of years to try and get the message across, and this is really the first open opportunity for consultation we've had to put it in. But it certainly is by no means the first thing that's gone up the road, and I'm hoping that it'll be a bit more successful this time.
I can't remember. William, did you want to make a comment first? No. Ros.
Yes, thank you. Obviously pleased that there was this opportunity, and I know we're in session now, so I am speaking for North Somerset, that I know those conversations are happening with North Somerset. We are obviously very badly affected by damping. It's the one thing that does make me see red each time, as it does others, and I know we will be, we are working with you.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that close.
Ourselves, and I know we have been having conversations for the last 5 years that Nigel's been leader, so as well as before. So we will continue. Maybe we will have a celebration. Maybe when the PCC comes in, there won't be any damping. Who knows? I did see a pig fly over. I went by the window.
Unbelievable.
Well, we're asked to note this response and to keep up our campaigning. I'm sure members will support that. Thank you very much. Can I move then on to paper 13, which is the annual report of the custody visiting scheme? I think, John, you'll introduce this.
I'll just say a couple of things, Chair, if I may. Firstly, in terms of the training, I just highlight I'm particularly pleased that we now have a much more proactive sort of internal approach to training, and that's done in terms of joining up the custody visiting panel meetings, and that's delivered in-house significantly by our custody visiting development officer, so that's also saving us money. I'm very pleased with the developments that we've had and continued on that during this year. The percentage of visits, I think when you adjust for the closures that there's been, is actually at 94%, which obviously we can continue to improve, but I think is encouraging. The one statistic that I think we need to think about is the increase in the percentage of refusals of visits to 19%, and I think that's something we'll look at with the coordinators probably at the next meeting, Kirsten, isn't it? But that's we have introduced a new means of introducing custody visiting, which we hope would improve that, so I think we might just do some unpicking on that. And the final thing I wanted to say really was about the future of the scheme. I'm sure Kirsten will talk about this as well in a moment, but quite often when we go out and about, the thing that custody visitors ask us most, with obviously with all the changing going on in police governance, is the impact of police and crime commissioners for the scheme and what that will be. And what I say to them each time we have it,
sorry, John. That's all right. It could have been a worse ringtone, Doug.
Yes, it's not too bad. When custody visitors do ask about the future of the custody visiting scheme, what I've been saying to them, and I know what Kirsten's been saying as well, is that the responsibility to run a custody visiting scheme will carry over into the PCC. It's a statutory responsibility which will continue. Certainly the authority and the constabulary view it as very important in terms of reassuring the public and public confidence that Rob was mentioning, that there is a strong and robust custody visiting scheme. And if all else fails, I will remind them that the corporate manslaughter regime has extended into custody, police custody, so, and that they will have responsibilities in relation to that. So we've tried to reassure them that it will be an important part of policing in Avon Somerset going forward, but obviously that is something that we will need to discuss with PCCs in November and beyond. Overall then, I think the scheme is in good health, and I would particularly like to pay tribute to our custody visiting officer, Lorna Muffet, who I think has done an excellent job this year, and also to the leadership from Kirsten, and I think the ongoing link members, the linkage that they have with the panels has worked very well, and I think makes the custody visitors feel, you know, and is evidence of how seriously the authority takes the scheme.
Yes, I concur with that. Thank you very much, Lorna, and to Kirsten for everything you've done. It's one of the most comprehensive schemes in the country and a vital tool in terms of securing the confidence in custody arrangements. Kirsten, what would you like?
Well, I agree with the points that John's raised. I mean, the scheme has gone from strength to strength. I remember back in, it was 2006 when we had that damning audit report about the state of the scheme, and a lot of work and effort has gone into what we have now is a very high quality visiting scheme. We've got a waiting list of volunteers who want to join the scheme, and the quality of the training has greatly enhanced what we actually provide. Very much like to express our appreciation for the value we've received in constabulary in relation to the scheme. We had a conference last September on a Saturday, and the Chief very kindly came and opened that for us. And more recently, the Chief again attended an evening meeting where we said a very big thank you to some coordinators we've had for nearly 13 years that have been with the scheme. So very much appreciate the support we've had from that, and the good working relationships we've also had with custody inspectors across the districts. I think that we're very proud of the scheme that we've got now that we're going to leave for the incoming PCC, and I just hope, in what John's also said, that the volunteers and the work they do will be continue to be valued and supported by the PCC, and that they continue to motivate and help them in terms of delivering a high quality scheme.
Thank you, Kirsten. Are there any questions or comments at all? If not, I mean, the recommendations are that we note the report and the progress that's been made. A small typo, when we agree priorities, we'll be doing that for the 2012-2013 rather than the ones from last year, but with that small amendment, are people happy to accept the recommendations of that report? Thank you very much indeed. That moves us then on to item 14, which is the annual sustainability report. And I think Julian's going to do that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, AGM provides an opportunity to take stock over what's happened in the last 12 months. And I'm minded by the fact that we had a decision to make some while back about whether to make someone permanently responsible for delivering sustainability programme for the manager in place. And we decided to take that because we recognise not only the need to embed sustainability into our organisation, but also the benefits that it would accrue, not just in terms of carbon reduction, but also in hard cash reductions. So 12 months on from the last AGM, we can say that we've now got a carbon management reduction plan and programme, which is delivering real savings. Sustainability is much more than just carbon reduction, but that's clearly quite a central focus to it. And we've achieved it right across the spectrum, really. Most of our buildings are now showing considerable reductions in their CO2 emissions. The possible exception is Kenneth Steele House, which is, by its very nature, slightly more variable depending on activities that take place behind its walls. But in terms of galvanising the whole workforce and setting up a network of green champions throughout the constabulary, supported by the police authority, we've been able to make sure the awareness, but also the delivery of it. So, for example, the simple decision about switching computers off, which, believe me, it's a simple decision, but it's very difficult to get people to do, who for years thought that actually it was causing problems if they turned their computers off, ends up saving us £6,000 a month, £72,000 a year in terms of that reduced load. And that's just a small example. We've embarked on implementing automatic meter reading, which will help facilitate to be able to spot hotspots and be able to take action and remedial action where appropriate. We're introducing voltage optimization, which means that we pay for what we use and not for what sits in the plug. We've got significant reductions in the fuel around fuel and fleet usage. This report actually didn't have the numbers for fleet when it went to press, but that's a further 1,400 tonnes has come out from one year to the other just on our fleet. And if we just take it overall, the buildings that we're now introducing, the BFIs, have all got sustainability into the heart of them. And in terms of the Bridewell, which we opened this year, that was included photovoltaic cells, which enables it to generate electricity from the sun. And in fact, we actually got the display up in Bridewell so you can see how much it's saving us on a regular basis. We're not stopping there. We've got lots of other plans to carry on this progress really over the next 12 months. That will include an emphasis on lighting. We are looking at a waste category plan as well. That's wider than just the carbon reduction. And we're also, as you members know, looking at wind energy to see whether there's any opportunities in that area.
Thank you very much, Julian. William, would you like to make some comments as lead member?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, really, you've got the report here. I'd just like to commend not only Julian and the team, but particularly Hannah Watts, who is the lead officer on this initiative. We're making great inroads into this relatively recent Department of Sustainability, and 16% on our buildings. We look like we're on target to hit our 30% by 2016, and let's keep on forging ahead. It's also dealt with, of course, in the legacy report of 20L in this paper, these papers, which it covers it even more. What we are handing over to the new PCC. Thank you.
Thank you, William. And I would, Rose.
Thank you. I'm just interested in this discounted bus travel that is spoken about in here for Bristol or Bridewell. I'm just wondering, is it across the force area? Is it looked to bring it across? Is there a travel plan per district, per station, etc. I know in North Somerset we're trialling, some issues with electric bicycles, as are Bristol Airport at the moment. So I'm just wondering if there is any extra.
Yes, Ros, in the sense that all of those initiatives are being taken up, particularly by Hannah, but also through the Green Champion network. Bribewell happens to be a particular centre for it, being a new building. They also had electrical charging points for bikes, and it was picked up there by First Bus as their sort of opportunity to encourage staff for travelling into the centre of Bristol. Obviously, in some districts, it's more difficult for travel arrangements, but we are in conversation with all the sort of districts and councils to try and do what we can to improve the facilities available.
Thank you. Can I just have a supplementary to that? Speaking of Bristol Airport, are there conversations with that, with the flyer, etc.? Because that is opened up a number of avenues now with concessionary fares, etc. But they're very willing to work for anyone who lives in that area that may be travelling in or out either Bristol or down or whichever.
Well, I wasn't aware of that, Ross, so I'll get Hannah to look into that.
Yes.
Contact you.
If there's nothing else, I'd like to echo my thanks, both Julian's, particularly to Hannah, for all of this. This is one of the few areas where I've seen genuine expressions of admiration from HMIC, so we're actually doing something very right here and making serious cash savings. This is not greenling, this is stuff that's actually helping the constabulary as well as helping the environment. So I'm sure you'll be happy to note that report. Can I then change the subject considerably and move on to the annual Treasury Management Report, Mark?
Yes, rather than labour through the whole report, Chair, as much as I know members like to, perhaps if I ask you to turn to page 6, which is a page of numbers, but is probably a good starting point to summarise what happened from a Treasury Management point of view. Paragraph 5, and that summarises what happened in the last year numerically, and I'll just talk a little bit around those numbers, and then I'd just like to talk a little bit more about counterparties. So in the year 11-12, we adopted deliberately what I called a passive borrowing strategy. In other words, because the cost of borrowing was substantially higher than the return we were getting from our investments, it made sense to use our cash in the short term to fund short-term loan repayments and also the capital programme. So you can see that in the year, we've actually managed to reduce our borrowing rather than increase our borrowing. We've also reduced our cash levels. And during the year, we repaid £7 million worth of debt, £5 million of short-term loans and £2 million of longer-term loans that matured in the year. So therefore, reducing the actual cost of carrying debt much lower than we'd actually budgeted for, creating saving on interest costs. The average debt cost rose slightly, and that was because we repaid short-term debt, which was very cheap. We didn't take out any new debt to distort that figure. The actual return we got on our investments, so even reduced, we still got £33 million to invest, substantial sums. That deteriorated slightly, and that's really a reflection of what was happening in the market. Because, as you well know, you probably couldn't have a more difficult background to be running Treasury Management than we have currently. We're in recession, we had persistently high inflation, we have low interest rates, we have quantitative easing, we have a sovereign debt crisis in Southern Europe and Ireland. Banks are inextricably linked to sovereign debt crises, and we were able, through our advisors, to risk assess our banks. So whilst we kept our counterparties in place, we took shorter terms of deposit than we would like to because of the increased risk in the banking sector in the last year. Very depressing state of affairs, which means that we weren't able to really run deposits on average for longer than a month or two because of the risk situation, and we have to look to risk first in our Treasury Management strategy, not return. So a very difficult situation, which remains difficult now, and you'll hear on the news today the issues we have with Greece and Spain and the G20 still really kicking the can along the road and not sorting the problems out. So this will remain under very high levels of scrutiny from myself and the team at SEC as well, so that we don't take any risks at all with the funds of the authority. just to talk about counterparties, during the year, members will recall that we changed the rating criteria, the long-term rating criteria, from A+ to A-. So that's still investment grade criteria, but we had lowered it in order to keep a counterparty choice. If we hadn't done that, we would literally have only been able to invest with the Debt Management Office and HSBC, who don't want our money anyway. So keeping the list of counterparties of people who do want our money: Santander, Bank of Scotland, Lloyds Bank, Barclays, Royal Bank of Scotland, NatWest and Nationwide, all of whom, in my opinion, are going to be here tomorrow, next month, and in 6 months' time. We did tweak the counterparty ratings down. And as an annex to this report, I'm asking, slightly unusually for an annual report, I'm asking for one forward-looking change, only because I think it's reasonably urgent to do so. And that is, my proposal is that we drop the short-term ratings from the criteria that are used as an absolute assessment of counterparties and make it a relative criteria. Because the market tends to use the long-term rating as its assessment of a counterparty's credit worthiness. And I'm not proposing to change those. But I'd like to make the short-term rating really a relative guide rather than an absolute one, because the short-term ratings are becoming volatile, and I'd rather that we have regard to them rather than being constrained by them. So clearly, if we had two counterparties with acceptable long-term ratings, but one had a less good short-term rating, we'd take that in mind. We'd weight the one with the better short-term rating higher in terms of how much money we deposit there and for how long. But I think it's more useful to use the short-term rating as a relative measure. This is consistent with the advice that we've got from Arlene Close, who are the advisors to SCC, and it's consistent with what other people are doing in the marketplace. And also for me, I don't like having an over-reliance on credit rating agencies as the only source of decision-making for counterparties anyway, especially given their track record over the last 5 years. So I think members are invited to really note the report. I'm happy to take any questions. And Peter, I'd ask if members could agree to the short-term rating criteria change.
I'm sure people will note the report, and I think thank you very much, Mark, for managing that treasury management, because it is difficult times, and I think the way in which we've managed to sell off some debt and use our cash to do that has been very beneficial and saved us some money. The particular issue, as Mark has explained, is that with the volatility of rating agencies moving banks by several clicks almost at a whim, it will constrain the treasury management considerably unless there's some discretion, and Mark's asking for that due regard discretion rather than a strict adherence to rules as the market is volatile. And I'd like members to consider that and vote on that so that Mark has that proper mandate to do that. Are there any comments, Sue?
I think it's really important that we help SCC and ourselves with this flexibility, because the volatility of the credit agencies are being swayed so much now by other things much greater than the constabulary, that I think that we need to release the shackles a little bit in order to maintain the right decision. I mean, the interest rates are truly pathetic, but we are where we are, and we've got to do the best we can. So I think by releasing some of this, changing some of the rules that we've got, I think it's really important. So I would certainly endorse that.
Thank you. William?
Yes, just to say, at Finance Committee we echo these movements all the time, and I concur with Sue's points, and I propose that we move to agree this.
Thank you. Thank you, William. I take that as a proposal. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Sue. And all those in favour of that? Thank you very much. So you've got a clear mandate on that. Just struggling to try and think of things greater than the constabulary, but I'm sure. Thank you very much. Let's move on then to, I think, paper 16, which should be the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Bill. But,
that's right.
That's right. There we go, John.
I wasn't going to say anything about what's in the report at all. People may be relieved to know, but just perhaps to show how dynamic this area is, I was just going to highlight 4 things that have happened within the last week. We had a meeting and a number of members attended last Wednesday, following on from Chief Constable's Chief Executive's meeting with lead members from local authorities and other members and other key partners. There was a very helpful discussion, a number of issues there. In particular, there was an update on the position with the panel and the makeup of the police and crime panel. Whilst I don't think this has been 100% agreed, the latest proposal is that there will be 6 members on the panel from Somerset and 2 from each of the unitary authorities, and that the panel will go ahead and work on that basis for now, and will recruit the 2 independent members. Now, it's also been agreed, I think, that Bristol will be the lead authority from an administrative point of view. So obviously there's sort of still complication is that the mayor in Bristol will be entitled to a place on the panel, and we obviously won't know who that is until the same day as the election for the PCC, as that's when that's happening. And this sort of new piece, since we last met, is we're obviously now going to be the only place in the country where that is the case. So the final makeup of the panel necessarily will have to be agreed at that point, but that is the basis on which the panel are going ahead. We were briefed. The second thing I wanted to mention was we have actually a partners practitioners group next week on Monday, where we're going to look in more detail with community safety lead officers and partners at a number of areas. One of the areas we're going to look at particularly is elections and communications around elections. That was another key theme of the meeting with leaders last week, and I know members raised that at the informal seminar. We're very grateful that the head of communications from Bristol City Council has come along to talk to our meeting on Monday, and in particular talk about what they're doing in Bristol about publicising the election. So we're very keen that all partners sort of share on that, and as much as possible sort of work together and look at that together. Going back to this last Monday, the chair and Joanna Coulon, one of our policy officers, and myself went to meet with the chair and chief executive of the Avon Somerset Probation Trust. There is a consultation out at the moment, as I think members know, in terms of the future of probation. That was a very helpful discussion, and they have a number of ideas about what the most appropriate commissioning model is going forward. We have put together a draft response which we've shared with the force and indeed with the probation trust locally in terms of the right way ahead on that, and I think we've been talking to Kirsten, lead member, about that. That needs to be finalised by the end of this week and submitted this week, so I think any members who would be interested in seeing that, we'll provide them with a copy of that, and if they could let us have copies by the end of this week, comments rather, by the end of this week, that would be helpful. And the final sort of timeline update is yesterday we finally had actually the sort of confirmation letter back from Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary inspection into our transition preparation work. They seem to be featuring quite heavily today, don't they? Anyone would think there's a big constitutional change in policing coming up. But anyway, they came and inspected us. They wanted to see the Chief Constable and the Chair and myself and the officers working on transition separately. We were adamant that we've been working on this as a transition board generally, and the Chief Constable and the Chair were very clear on that view that they should see us and talk to us together about our preparations here, so that's what they did. The report is very much in keeping with the other themes. I think it's difficult to take too much from it in some ways, in that really primarily they have sort of taken the briefing we gave them and described back to us what we told them we were doing in many ways. But I think the key themes are they've mentioned our proactive and pragmatic approach. They've mentioned that we've kept transition costs to a minimum. They've mentioned the leading role that our team, and in particular Dan Howitt, one of our officers, has played in relation to policing and crime plans nationally, which was very pleasing. They've mentioned that our microsite is a useful tool to brief candidates. And they've referred positively to the lead member model and the work that we've been doing on the police and crime strategic assessment, working very closely with our partners. So I think that's all positive. There's an area, for those of you familiar with these things, at the end of this, which is areas for more detailed consideration. I think it's positive that the only two things they put there are things to continue doing what we're currently doing, namely maintaining our momentum as we move closer towards the handover, and ensuring that the balance between the authority's attention to its current responsibilities and transition remains proportionate. So overall I was pleased with what we got, and again I'd like to pay tribute particularly to Joe Kulan, who's done an awful lot of work on the transition work, and to Alice Jones as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions of John over that, or indeed to anybody else on transition? So, John.
Just one simple question. The PCP makeup is with the Bristol situation. Is it 2 plus the mayor or 2 including the mayor?
I think strictly it's if it were just going to be 1, it would be the mayor who was entitled to that position. Obviously, I don't quite know what the discussion was at the meeting in terms of what, because they've agreed there to be an additional one from Bristol. So we do have someone in the audience who might be able to help us, don't we? But
I think my understanding is the mayor has the right to claim a seat, but I don't know that I'm not clear that it's over and above. I think that it's work in progress, John. I mean, it is nothing to do with the authority as to how that body is constituted. If there are no other comments or questions, then we'll note that report. Thank you, and move on to the transitional governance arrangements, as John sort of started to allude to already.
Well, as you know, we've heard a lot about the lead member arrangements and the sort of constitutional aspects of moving to that earlier on in the meeting, and that's all been approved now. This paper is a very brief one, just following on from the more practical discussion that we had at the last informal seminar, really about how to make those practical arrangements work. We've taken the feedback that was given at the meeting, and what we're really looking for is a balance between the sort of discretion, freedom to work flexibly for lead members and lead officers from the force and from the authority, and just needing to have some sort of structure to make sure everything happens, and in particular that the key sort of overriding aims really is that we continue to make information available publicly so that people can see how the force are performing and what the issues are, and also that we have given the staff associations an opportunity to contribute, and that there are sort of appropriate reports then into the Public Police Authority meeting. So really what this paper tries to do is just to set out some proposals for how that will work. We had a helpful discussion yesterday with Julian in terms of working very closely with the Chief Officer Group and their staff to make all of the arrangements work, and I think they were happy basically with the proposals that we've got here. We've effectively got a trial meeting next week, haven't we, and that the Finance Committee is very much ahead of the others. I think we'll as ever, the Treasurer says, there we are. We would then, there's then a pause of about a month, and the other meetings will then, the lead member meetings will take place in about a month's time. So I think very much next week we'll be coming out to all of the lead members and working with you in terms of agendas and liaising with the force on that. So hopefully people are happy with the sort of balance that we've struck there, Chair, but I don't really have anything else to add to the paper.
No, I mean, this is very much moving towards making sure that the meetings probably reflect the way that meetings will happen in the future, and that the public access to the information that's exchanged there is fair. I'm sure it's not 100% right, and this is a chance to try and test, but it's a very good working start on this. So we're asked to approve the processes and the timescale set out in the report, and the draft template for reporting back. And when John's already asked me, John Parham, the opportunities for these issues to be then fed back through the future meetings of the authority, through the Chair's coordination group, and also through any risk register or scrutiny log that we'll maintain during that period, will allow all members to be kept up to speed with the way in which these lead member meetings are kept running. So are there any other comments before we move to an approval of this process? In which case, can I see a show of hands approving? Thank you very much indeed. The other thing that we need to look at today revolves around another change as a result of the future constitutional changes, and this deals with an independent audit committee, and again I'll ask John to take us through that.
I think I might like the Treasurer.
The Treasurer, I'm sorry, I do beg your pardon.
No, that's quite right.
Yeah,
since it does say Treasurer on it.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, John. So the proposal here is to establish, subsequent to this meeting, an interim audit committee, which would then be capable of being handed over to the Police and Crime Commissioner as a functioning audit committee, which is a requirement for the Commission to have in place. And in fact, the requirement post-transition is for the Commissioner and the Chief Constable to have an audit committee, and we're proposing to have a combined audit committee, which this interim audit committee will morph into. I don't see any value in having 2 sets of internal audit and 2 sets of audit committee. I think we work well together at the moment, and we propose to continue to do that. So with the performance side of performance and audit being now looked after on a lead member model, this audit committee will now home in on audit. And by that, I mean, I won't list out the things in 6, but principally the focus is about risk management, it's about internal controls, it's about governance, it's about having the right policies, and it's about setting the scope for internal and external audit, setting their fees, receiving their reports, and then making sure that actions and recommendations from those auditors are followed out. Also receiving comments from external audit on our accounts and any issues around the external audit of those accounts leading up to their annual audit letter. So the proposal here is that we would have a committee chair who I think we've already agreed to, which is Alan Lawrence, and then the committee chair and the chair of the Police Authority will appoint 2 independent members from this membership group to the audit committee. So we start with 3 at transition anyway. There'll be 3 members of the committee which are independent of the PCC. Now clearly the PCC may or may not want to change that when they're appointed, but at least it's compliant on day 1. And then the standing officers would be proposed to the Deputy Chief Constable and the Force CFO, myself and the Authority CEO, and then Police Authority Policy Officer as required. So it'll look similar to where we are now, but they have a different and more discrete focus in terms of audit. The proposal is that we'll meet 4 times a year, and the proposal is that the members appointed to it would initially be appointed to 31st of March, which allows a transition through to PCC, but also gives a sensible review point in the first 4 to 5 months or so of the PCC being in place. And also that review point coincides with the end of our year, so we can review it again ready for the next fiscal year.
Thank you very much, Mark. I mean, as Mark has stressed, this is a slightly unusual transition arrangement in that it actually transitions past and has a life in the new regime under the constitution of the Police and Crime Commissioner. We've danced a little bit on the heads of pins as to how we set this up, in that until half an hour ago, no one had approved Alan Lawrence as the chair of that. Alan is happy to serve. I've had discussions with members about who might wish to take on the role of moving this forward to the 31st of March, and Alan and I will talk more formally now with people, assuming that you approve this arrangement. And as Mark said, it will be something that the PCC may well review, but we need to have something that's up and running and continuing through those first few months of the PCC's existence. Any comments from members? I also perhaps ask for comments from the constabulary if they're you're content with all of this. If not, then I'll ask you to show your approval of that proposal, please. Thank you very much indeed. Right, paper 19 is the revised member scheme of allowances. Mark, are you going to take us through this as well, please?
Yes, very briefly. Another blockbuster from me, but very little to say on this. The changes to the member scheme of allowances are purely and simply to reflect the changes today that were anticipated in this draft to move to a lead member model. So where allowances used to be associated with being committee chairs or subcommittee chairs, that no longer is appropriate in this new world. So the allowances are now linked to the lead member structure that we've just approved. So I'm pleased to say that nobody is no one's pay or allowances are changed because of this, but of course we have to make sure that we are linking pay with the right duties that we're asking members to fulfil. So the main changes there in the scheme of allowances are in section 4, where we've consolidated and simplified that to be authority chair, deputy chair, lead member, and then lead member, and there's 2 classes of lead member which reflect the types of committees and subcommittees that we previously had. So hopefully members will see that doesn't make any changes to what they pay, but it does still is consistent with the changes we had today in the AGM. And then while I was doing that, I just took the opportunity to tidy up the process of claiming expenses to reflect the changes we made following the internal audit of members' expenses, and actually bringing the controls back in-house to the member support desk. So that's reflected in section 12, so that is now consistent with the RSM 10 recommendations, which have been fully implemented. Otherwise, no other changes, and I recommend this to the members.
Thank you very much, Mark. I mean, just to summarise it, it allows us, with these technical changes, to continue exactly with the status quo, no uplifts for inflation or anything, and people receiving the same allowances that they've received this past 12 months to continue until the 22nd of November. And with the internal controls that we now have on the expenses as well that you've been familiar with, that we've introduced over the past few months. If there are no comments, then can I just ask for a show of agreement to those, please? Thank you very much indeed. That moves us to paper 20, which comes in a large number of parts. And again, I'll ask John to introduce this briefly.
Noted. Yes, at the last meeting, the authority agreed to prepare these legacy reports, and we agreed the list of what they would be. They were duly done and have gone to the relevant committees and to the relevant working groups for approval. We did also look at them collectively at the last Chair's Coordination Group, and some changes and tweaks were suggested there. So the only things I'd highlight this is something that we very much worked jointly on with the Constabulary. These are our joint views of the authority and the Constabulary about the key achievements and particularly what the key issues are for PCCs to take account of. They're really important for two reasons. Firstly, once they're approved at this meeting, they'll be uploaded to the PCC microsite and be available for candidates to get a more detailed view of the key issues that will be there for them when they arrive in November. But secondly, they also will be used to inform our work in highlighting the key issues of further work for the authority between now and November. So I wasn't proposing that we go through them. They've all been through their relevant committees and the relevant lead members. I was really just going to throw it open for any questions.
Right, thank you, John. I mean, I think John's made the point that this is an aim to inform both the public and potential candidates as to where we are. There's no point publishing these in November and then people not understanding some of the issues that the reports highlight. I don't see them as the absolute end, because there will be things that happen between now and November that can also be uploaded and can inform people. And they have been through all of the various committees and discussed at some length. So I'm more than happy to take questions, and by exception, if any committee chair stroke lead member wishes to make a comment. But William.
Yes, just one thought. In terms of Finance Committee, for example, in terms of advising prospective candidates, apart from the three obvious candidates, there could be many independent candidates. Could I ask that these briefing sessions could be as one meeting with all the candidates, as opposed to, let's say there might be a dozen candidates, a separate meeting for each one, just to make everybody's time and effort worthwhile.
I mean, I think, yes, I understand what you're saying, William. I think the commitment from the authority and from the constabulary is that all candidates will be treated equally. I mean, if there are candidates who are content to be briefed in a communal session, then I'm sure that could be arranged. But I think they would all have the right to have those private discussions. And it won't be a matter for me, but the intent and the description that's on the website is that once we've got past the 18th or 19th of October, when all the closing date of candidacy closes, then there will be a review so that no candidate is disadvantaged in not having briefings that other candidates have had. But I'm sure there'll be a pragmatic approach if people are happy to sit in the same room at the same time. If there are no other questions or comments, then can I move that we adopt these legacy reports so that they can be published on our websites. Thank you very much. That moves us to item 21, which is a verbal update from Julian on where we are on the accommodation programme.
Thank you, Chair. Major PFI project is at the stage rapidly moving towards a financial close. In order to get there, all the contractors' proposals are being discussed with the Blue Light Partnership, with the preferred bidders, on the whole, each one of those, the drawings, the agreement, what the outputs are all being signed off and effectively banked, ready for the eventual sign-off date. As far as the plannings are concerned, we now have 3 out of the 4 sites with full planning permission. So Keynsham and Gloucester Road sites, which we already had planning permission, were followed by Blackrock Quarry, which is the 3rd one. The only one we still have outstanding is Express Park, where there is an planning issue around lizards from the River Parrot on Express Park, and we're trying to move that because we would quite like that to be a conditional planning consent. In other words, we're still going to have a reptile survey, and we're still going to mitigate any actions as a result of that survey, but at the moment the actual consent has been held up, so we are trying to discuss that with Sedgemoor, because really it's a bit of an incumbence at the moment to be held up that way. Other than that, there is some other issues which I'll talk about with exempt in terms of the sort of commercial side, but we'll come on to that another time or later. If we then talk about the other parts of the accommodation brief, Taunton Police Station, at the moment we commissioned a feasibility study which was produced by South West One into the joint deployment of us into Dean House with the Taunton Dean. And at the moment, that report, certainly the co-location remains a committed aim of Taunton Dean executive officers. But there are some issues in terms of the overall quality of that building. In other words, that in order to get it into a satisfactory state for us to take over a sort of a tenancy arrangement with them would involve quite high investment. So at the moment, that's being considered by the Dean, and we are obviously keen to partner where we can, subject to that being agreed, but we're also looking at other opportunities to make sure that those two are running parallel. Also the central store, to have a central archive store situated on this headquarters site, make best use of our existing property, was put forward to the CAMS committee and was approved by the Police Authority to move ahead on that one. And that's we're still at the moment in the sort of design feasibility bit of that. Thornbury Co-location Council, there's been some movement on that one of late, and in terms of the overall, the front office refurbishment is, you'll be pleased to know, is on target and on budget, given the issues we had to get it off the ground. But it's really good to know that at the moment it's...
Will it happen before the 22nd of November? We'd really like it.
Well, we're in week 13 of 26, so the answer is probably yes, we should. Just about. The Bridewell now fully occupied, so there's now around 550 officers and staff who consider it their base. And given, we had a few little teething problems to begin with, particularly getting used to partners and a different sort of environment, particularly around the inquiry office at the front, taking into account the probation and their footfalls. And, as I say, there were a few teething problems, but I have to say most of those have been resolved very well by not only the constabulary but also probation taking a very sort of important part in that role. I think that's probably all to report at this stage. I'll take any questions.
Fine, thank you, Julian. Any questions of Julian and then John?
Yeah, one parochial one. Shepton Mallets. I know there's discussions have been ongoing about moving into the public sector hub on the Mendip campus. Would you like to comment on how you think that's going?
Well, there's Shepton Mallets, like a number of other police police station sites where we're looking to see whether they are the best in terms of location and best in terms of value for money. Where we take a view on that, John, we will obviously look at co-location opportunities, as we have done with Kingswood and where we are doing at Thornbury, etc. So similarly, we will look at the opportunities around Shepton Mallet, but we also look, as Julian Moss told us this morning, about the use of the library within Portishead. So using those facilities for our neighbourhood teams to be able to meet the public in surgeries and other opportunities.
Can I just,
yes,
John, as a local councillor, where do you think we are with that? Because that's really interesting for me.
Obviously, I've got an interest here because I'm portfolio holder for Mendip, which is responsible for the hub, the public sector hub being created, and from Mendip's point of view, there seems to be a distinct lack of progress on what your requirements are. You know, the feedback we've had is, yes, you want to do it. We say, yes, we want you there. But there's obviously some I's to be dotted, T's to be crossed to make that happen. And we've been pushing to try and make it happen and don't seem to be getting very far. So
thanks for that.
If you could unblock the blockage, I think.
Yeah,
I'd be happy
we'll take that offline and try and get that sorted, John. That's really helpful. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, then I'll thank Julian for that update, and we'll return to some of the more detailed stuff in exam session. That moves us on to strategic alliances, which comes in 3 parts. And again, I think the first one, Julian, I'll turn back to you.
Yes, thank you again, Chair. I think it's quite interesting that the introduction to this AGM, we were talking about systems having moved from paper systems to real information systems. And similarly, members in this room know of the issues we had implementing SAP as part of our transformation of these systems. There are still challenges around the SAP system, we know that. But what we have got from it is much more visibility, one version of the truth, and I would contend that some of the ability for us to take on the challenges of the austerity cuts and reductions have been made easier by the information that we now get from our systems and the ability to use those in a sensible way. The other point is around South West 1, in the sense that I look at other constabularies who are going through the same sorts of degrees of change and having to meet the same levels of cuts. A lot of them have gone full scale into cutting back office. It's often, it's accepted that we don't want to reduce frontline policing. But of course, in taking out a lot of back office support systems, you actually impact on the front end of the force. And I think one of the things we've had is it's been recorded that perhaps being in the South West contract has been a problem in terms of not being able to use that as a means to save money out of the austerity. But instead, we've used the fact that we're in our contract and in our partnerships to save money and do things in a different way. And as a result, our back office systems are actually there supporting the constabulary in full, and we thinking of different ways of actually achieving our end results. So. Sometimes the South West one gets the bad press, but I'm just really saying that we've got to balance that with some of the good things that we've got from that very important partnership. On the procurement, before I mention that, beginning of June saw the appointment of the new Chief Executive. Some of the members in this room have already met Ian Bowman, who comes to this contract as the CEO, having previously been in IBM, who are responsible for the BP contract, so it's a very large and had a very important role in that division. He takes over from Fiona Capstick, who left at the beginning of the month. We've got, at the moment, in terms of workforce management, a module, the system, again, has been outstanding for quite some while. We've made the sort of final tests available from other police forces. So we've been, and we've had members of the constabulary go, police officers particularly, go off and see those systems and workforce systems in in situ. So the last one was to go and see the origin system working in Thames Valley, and they looked at the Crown one in other constabularies. And as a result, we're coming very close to that conclusion of which of those systems to go for, and we'll be then ploughing very fast to try and get that replacement system in for our DMS system. On the procurement side, Colin alluded to that in his opening address. We now have over £7 million worth of delivered savings. Now, the assured savings in the contract was 15 million, and we're already at just about 50%. Now, you could say we're in year 4, so we're ahead of the game. But more importantly, if you then take others which we've already agreed that the savings are there, but have not yet been delivered because they relate to ongoing years, we're already up to 12 million. And our total pipeline comes to 24 million pounds, which, you know, if it was achieved, and I'm a half glass full person when it comes to this one, because I recognised that right at the outset, IBM, when they were part of the bid, recognised there were more savings to get at, but they were contractually assuring a lower number, and that's the bit that we continue to drive for. And I have to say the attitude hasn't changed. They don't say, well, when we get to 15 million, we stop. They don't see it as a target. They see it as a line that they will continue, will cross and continue to then deliver for us throughout the rest of the contract. I think onto other things, in terms of whilst we had some good procurement savings, we had the slightly unsatisfactory position which was reported at the last meeting about the fact that we had quite a few staff vacancies. This was the double-edged sword of having a good professional service, is that those members then get poached off to other companies. And we actually had a situation where we had quite a few vacancies. And now I'm pleased to say that four have been taken on by South West Ones, so that we'll restore that sort of balance. We've also had a slight issue around the marketplace system, which is Zanzibar, but that's not an issue, a local issue. It's actually MPIA's system, this one, and it's some issues around the security, which they're trying to address. Of course, each force being on different platforms has proved a little slightly more difficult than they thought. The other area which members were aware where there was some significant discussions was on the response of South West One to utility and water management service, and those discussions continue, and there is now a proposal in terms of work that is coming back to us from South West One. In terms of IT, which was an area which sort of started slowly, is now sort of gathering quite a lot of pace. There's a lot of investment going into updating the wide area network throughout the force area. And we've also got a capital refresh program which is replacing our PCs with all-in-ones, i.e. they have a screen and a processor in one, and are more energy efficient, so that's good for my other hat. So we're pleased to see that working well. At the same time, we will be updating to the Windows 7 environment, so we'll bring it right up to the latest edge, just in time for them to bring out Windows 8. And finally, on the which I mentioned here in the service desk, where there were some issues, probably with bigger issues with the other partners, in some sense, Taunton Dean. They're coming up with some proposals to improve the overall service help desk. We've had a better response on that side, but the area that we had issues with was the technology that they wanted to introduce couldn't actually work in the environment, so they had to go back to the drawing board on that. But in terms of the service we're getting, that's still very acceptable. That's everything.
Thank you very much, Julian. I think that's an arrow going in a better direction than perhaps we've had in previous reports. So any questions or comments, colleagues? If not, then thank you very much for that, Julian. We'll note that report and move on to Part B, which is regional collaboration. I think, John, you'll set us up on this at least.
Yes. Just to say, in terms of the Police Authority Regional Joint Committee, which members will be aware that we're a member of, that has not actually met since we last met. There is another meeting on the 9th of July. I think the key issues from our point of view will continue to press for the relevant Section 23 sort of collaboration agreements to be put in place. we're leading obviously on Zephyr on the Triforce training facility, and we expect those to be finalised very shortly and certainly before the PAJC. We have invited the ACPO lead for the 14 Force West Coast Forensic Analytic Services project to come to the next PAJC as well. That's at quite an interesting stage, as you know, with the lead force and the lead authority for that project. I think it's fair to say the current contract is coming to an end next March. I think it's fair to say it's been a great success. It's delivered savings, if you can believe it, of approaching 50% from the previous solution, and has been a great deal of improved service connected with that as well. As I said, the current contracts run out at the end of March. There is a 3-month transition period. The contracts can't be extended, certainly within the terms of the procurement regulations. The West Coast Consortium Joint Committee met back in March, and they agreed that we would use the national framework that is currently being put in place by the Home Office for this. That is expected to be in place by the end of July. We're hopeful that that will be put in place on time. The West Coast Contract Management team, who are actually based here in Avon Somerset, have been... that may be them now, I don't know. They have been involved in the process. I mean, to be honest, they do look quite significantly to the West Coast team, I think, in terms of that Home Office national framework and the success that the West Coast Consortium has had in terms of their contractual arrangements.
They really want you, don't they?
The strategy for this consortium is to have at least 2 bidders in each lot, and I think that does mean, as members will know, we've talked about it in a few forums, certainly in the last Chair's Coordination Committee, that is going to put some challenge in terms of the actual full business case coming forward towards this authority. We are still planning on the basis of having a business case in October, and therefore it would be the authority that approves the arrangements before the incoming PCCs. I think we will just have to keep that under review, however. It just depends, firstly, on the Home Office framework being in place in time, and on that sort of negotiation between the various authorities where we have this strategy of having the 2 tenderers in each lot. We'll bring an update to the next meeting. I think that's probably all we can say now. We're working closely with the team to try and get things through as quickly as we can. I don't know if there's anything Doug wants to add.
No, I think that's you've explained it pretty well, John. I don't think there's anything I really need to add, except that if we can get it all fixed up before the transition, it would be a great feather in the cap of this authority.
Yeah, agree.
Well, I think we will do our best on that, but it is on a knife edge. It does rely on the Home Office team getting the framework sorted, and even if we are up for it, it also relies on 13 other authorities signing on the date before the time, and I think that is on a knife edge, and there is an operational concern here that if it doesn't get signed up, it may not be on the top of the agenda for everybody getting their policing plans, and all of a sudden we are starting to get vulnerable in terms of provision of forensic services. And I think that the more we can drive on to get this sorted, the better, but it will be a knife edge.
Is there a plan B, Chair, if it isn't successful?
In terms of the timing, Anne?
Yeah. Well, in terms of what will happen if the contract can't be signed?
Well, I think in terms of the plan B, if things can't be signed before the 22nd of November, then the business case and all of the compelling sort of commercial and operational policing reasons as to why this has to be put in place will be put in the intro of the Police and Crime Commissioners from the 14 forces.
And it will require 14 Crown Commissioners to then sign up. So.
I think the point about that would be it would be very much more difficult, I suspect, to get agreement afterwards than it is if we can get it before then.
But that is the plan B. So,
apart from the tenders, which I can see as something that has to happen post the framework, do we know whether the other 13 police authorities are going for this agreement?
Yes, I mean we've had meetings. I mean, I attended. It's actually arranged by the contract management team here. I attended the constabulary officers meeting, just to sort of brief them on the governance issues, and all of the constabulary leads are very much supportive of the existing arrangements and continuing as a 14-force basis and running a procurement together, which is basically what we're saying to do. The authorities, Doug, at the meeting all support this approach, don't they, and support this arrangement. I don't think there's any issue with that. It is, you know, actually what they do have to do is approve the final financial case of what they're going to get when the process is complete.
That can only happen once the tenders come in.
Indeed.
But subject to the framework, are all the police authorities, or shall I ask, are we ready that once the framework comes in, we press a button and the tenders are ready to go out, and everyone has been highlighted about what they have to do in the time frame?
I mean, the way it's run, it is run by the contract management team here. They are geared up, you know, and have all the documentation ready, so that as soon as the framework is let on the 31st of July, they're sending out their mini tender underneath that framework on the 1st of August. So, you know, it's set up to do that.
There's an element to watch this space. In terms of other collaborations, so is there anything you want to add at this stage? No. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to protective services, and Rod, I'm sure.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. 3 segments to this short paper. The first is around Zephyr, the South West Regional Organised Crime Unit. In January of this year, it was subject to a national review. All of the ROCUs were reviewed by a central team to test how well prepared we were or not for the draft strategic policing requirement. In summary, we've had the report now and we are assessed as being prepared. There are a couple of minor recommendations which we take in the spirit that they're meant, and those are being worked through and implemented. Zephyr has also managed to come in under budget and make a saving of about £119,000 for the 11-12 budget, and that will be used as per the agreement to reduce the contribution by regional forces going forwards, and that's all been passed through the Finance Committee for each of the relevant authorities and forces. In relation to major crime, that's the Brunel partnership. During the last 12 months, as the report says, we've investigated 16 offences of murder or manslaughter, 1 stranger rape, and of course the multi-fatal collision on the M5. And there are 5 work streams being led by the leads across the 5 forces to enhance interoperability, and you'll see what those 4 areas are in paragraph 7. The NPIA have also undertaken a national review of 6 national collaboration sites for major crime. There are 6 across the England and Wales landscape. We're one of them, and we still await the final report, but we have had an early indication that we will be subject to some of the better practice in some areas. When the final report comes through, I'll be able to give you a more detailed update on what that report is saying. And the final strand is around special branch. There is some consultation work going on across the region for the 3 other forces to join their special branches into the collaboration, should the constabulary and the police authority agree to that. Devon and Cornwall are the most keen. They'd ideally like to come in before a police and crime commissioner. The business case was delivered to me earlier this week, and it needs to be consulted on and looked at in more detail. And Dorset are keen to come in after the Olympics, and Gloucestershire are still undecided. So they've indicated in principle they'd like to come in, but haven't progressed it too much further than that at the moment. ACPO TAM, the Terrorism and Allied Matters, are shortly organising a National Chief Officer Leads meeting to discuss their view of the future of special branch collaborations across the UK. I hope to attend that, and once I've been, we'll get a fuller picture of their intentions regarding collaboration across the UK, post the Olympics, of course. And finally, the CTIU, the Counter-Terrorism Intelligence Unit, has provided 24/7 coverage for the Olympic torch as it travelled through the region and supported the intelligence gathering operation there. The duties have now reverted to extended early and late tours, but that coverage will increase again 24/7 to coincide with the full Olympic Games.
Thank you, Rod. Any questions, Rose?
Yes, a comment really, just to say, reference the Olympic torch and coming through from North Somerset. I did send my congratulations in actually by email, but to say I thought it was extremely well done. It was very professional, everyone was there, and I'd just like to say thank you for North Somerset for what you achieved. Very difficult times. With some of the crowds were there and some of them weren't. Especially when the flame came in its little miner's lamp to Weston as well. That was a difficult one because of the whole access point. But just to say congratulations on that.
That's definitely the work of many, and I'll make sure it's passed on to the people who deserve it.
I think that's true. I mean, I think it is, the public won't be aware of a lot of the work that CTIU and others had to do to make that look as smooth and easy as it was, and if you can pass on those.
Of course I will. Thank you.
Can I just add something on that? Because I've been attending the government meetings, and I did, on behalf of the Police Authority, thank those people here, but I think it should be recognised just how much hard work and, you know, not difficult, it was time-consuming and very painstaking work that went in to making it such a success. So,
Dave Haler and Kevin Instance are the two key leads on that, and I'll make sure that they're...
Yeah, well, I
Thank you.
Do it in the meeting.
Thank you,
I think it's very...
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, we'll note all of those three reports, and then perhaps, Rod, if you can take us on to the next paper dealing with the helicopter and the National Air Service.
Yes, thank you. I'm fortunate to have Caroline Peters in the back of the room, and again, Caroline has been doing the heavy lifting in relation to this, and the progress is absolutely down to her leadership around this. So I just want to say thank you to Caroline while she's here. In relation to where we are with NPAS, the National Police Air Service, and the Filton Airfield update, there was 4 months worth of due diligence by West Yorkshire Police and their police authority, and it was finally approved by their police authority that they will become the lead force for NPAS. So that's removed a certain amount of uncertainty and doubt, which is good news. The sequencing plan for the Western Counties Air Operations Unit, which is our consortium with Gloucestershire, to join NPAS as the South West region, slipped a little bit from April 2013 to July 2013, and we're just accommodating that slippage. In April, it was also publicly announced that the Air Operations Consortium could remain and maintain police air operations at Filton rather than Killern. If you remember the discussions that we were having about whether we would have to move to RAF Killern, which we didn't think was operationally suitable, it was confirmed in April that we won't have to do so, which is very good news. And Mark's been helping us with the proposed funding model, and I'm pleased to say that the proposed capital top slice model is the one that's going to be progressed. It's much more advantageous and equitable for us, and Mark was very key in helping present some strong arguments to influence that debate, so thank you to Mark. In terms of Wiltshire joining the consortium, there were some complexities over their relationships and contracts with the Wiltshire Air Ambulance charity. That's being unpicked. It is complicated, but they will now be joining the consortium in the South West region in July of 2013. The slight fly in the ointment is that NPAS have suggested that as a result of them joining under those terms, they're looking for Avon and Somerset and Gloucestershire to absorb the £120,000 costs of that, because Wiltshire want a step down in terms of the amount they have to pay for that. It would be on an 80-40 split. We've said before that we wouldn't use that as a showstopper or die in a ditch over it, but we actually don't agree that we should be paying that money. It is a borderless service, and I feel that it should be absorbed across the national network, and that's the argument that we're pushing forward on, and we'll let you know how we get on with that in due course. There's a small project team now working on the transition, and Caroline's working very hard in relation to that. BAE Systems, who own the land that's up for sale there, we're working very closely with them. They have committed to working with the police and Great Western Air Ambulance charity in safeguarding our operations inside the airfield boundary. There are a number of options we're looking at it, the actual location of the airframe, and there is a potential preference for us, but those are pros and cons set against the views of our partners, and we're just trying to coordinate our thinking on that. But they do recognise the opportunity, as do we, for us to work with not only the charity but Great Western Air Ambulance and have a single footprint somewhere inside the airfield boundary. And I think that would be good for the public to see those, certainly those two public sectors and the charity working closely together and to save some money. Just in relation to BAE, we were hoping to have an agreed position in readiness for the South Gloucestershire planning inspection, which is scheduled for the 21st of June. That's unlikely now. It's becoming unrealistic. There are still some issues to tie down with BAE, and I recently wrote to Sir Ian King asking for some finalisation around the issues that we want to tie down. Unless Caroline's got a very hot update in relation to that point, that's where we are at the moment. In terms of transition, some of them are very tactical. They're removing the windsock. We'd like them to keep it there, right the way through to slightly more costly issues, like they're going to remove when they evacuate the site. BAE will take the snow clearing capability away, and also the fuel that we take for granted. There is a fuel capability there. We pay for the fuel, of course, but they make sure that it's always topped up and available for us. So there's a whole range of issues that we're just working through with them to get the best deal that we can. Nothing insurmountable that I'm aware of at the moment, and full steam ahead.
Thank you very much, Rod. I mean, moving in the right direction, and a lot of hard work, as you say, but still some way to go, and anything that the authority can do to assist in that, we will. But are there any questions of Rod at that stage? Yes.
I just need clarification on where's the additional, why is there an additional 120k?
When Wiltshire agreed to accept the Filton proposal as opposed to Killern is slightly closer to Wiltshire, and the response times to the far side of Wiltshire and Swindon could be achieved inside the parameters of 15 to 20 minutes to respond to the western side of Swindon. Because they agreed without a fight to go to Filton, they're saying that the response times to that part of Swindon is a deterioration of the service, and they therefore want to step down in the contributions they make. We don't agree, because there are aircraft on the other side of Wiltshire that could also respond and cover. So that's where they were hoping to get a financial benefit from going quietly to Filton.
And that's where the issue comes from, the national argument. It's a national service, it shouldn't fall on to the neighbouring forces. Yeah. So if there are no other comments, then we'll note that report. Thank you very much, Rod. And move on to the final report in this open session, which I think Emma will take us through Windsor.
Yeah, I'm sure all members are very familiar with Windsor, certainly those in the HR committee will be so. What the paper outlines for you is clearly we've had some challenges with regards to timing issues with Windsor Part 1, it becoming statute on the 1st of April, which is possibly fitting, and on the 30th of March only receiving the statutory instruments, and then about 2 to 3 weeks later receiving the guidance. So it has been, it's had its challenges. That said, we've had a goal group that's run with all interested parties, and we've made quite good progress in terms of changing policy, procedure, practices. So we're up and ready. We're doing lots of manual workarounds, but effectively the recommendations of Windsor Part 1 are embedded within the organisation. You'll notice that in terms of costing, it is going to cost us. The main cost is going to be on social hours, and what we know is about 45% of the hours worked of our police officers, our shift police officers, actually get the additional 10% in terms of payment. So potentially it could be quite a big cost for us, and we're doing some work around that in terms of there's only way we can reduce those hours without impacting upon the service. In terms of Windsor Part 2, you'll notice that it's been broken up into 2 stages in terms of the negotiation. The first stage being July the 24th of this year. We're expecting to know whether or not there's been any agreement. I have to say that I've heard very little in terms of progress. It's been very quiet. And this summer we're expecting then the major pieces of negotiation to be around pay and allowances. We would expect that the interim expertise and professional accreditation allowance, which is talked about in the paper, is likely to cost us the same as SPP, which means we will be back at square one. Stage 2 issues, which will report the following summer of 2013, the issues there, you'll see the key issues will actually be for us as a constabulary. One will be about restricted duties and restricted officers, and the secondly will be about frontline pay and the expectation that there may be an additional percentage of pay paid for those that are frontline. And the impact for us on things like specialist roles will be something we'll need to bear in mind. So, as an example, in corporate learning and development, we would like our trainers to be the best specialists, but actually if they learn an extra 8 or 10% staying on the front line, what's the incentive for them to actually become trainers? And that could be said for a number of non-frontline roles, which, however, we would deem as specialist. So that's a dash through for you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emma. I mean, I think, I know there are still issues around this, but getting Windsor 1 implemented on 24 hours notice was a notable achievement, and I'm sure we'll await with interest how Windsor 2 progresses. Anne?
I just wondered if Emma would clarify what frontline means in the Windsor report.
I think so far they're using the HMIC report. So it's things like your response, neighbourhood, those sorts of things, yeah. Where we're not clear is whether or not frontline will include things like specialist skills like CID and so on, and that's what we're not clear on, because of course you've got with the HMIC this idea of front, middle and back, so it's all a little bit unclear. It will depend on what they negotiate.
Are there any other questions? I mean, Jude isn't here, but any other members of the HR committee want to say anything? Otherwise, we'll cheer you on with all of that. And I'm sure we'll be looking forward to an early HMIC inspection of the Windsor report.
Yeah.
By Mr. Windsor.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. One thing that the Chief just asked if I would just cover is, what you may be aware is nationally the Police Federation have disputed Windsor Part 1, have said that actually the determinations and the guidelines are actually not in line with what was agreed at the PAT. What that has meant then is obviously there's a national debate. On a local level, we've actually been quite lucky in that we've got the Police Federation involved in our goal group. But what we do have is a number of disputes which actually come from a lack of Home Office clarification. And what we've had to do as a force is make determinations and make some stipulations about, for example, some allowances, and said this is how we're going to pay it. And obviously what we do then occasionally get to is in a friendly dispute with Federation around, well actually that's not what they interpreted to be. Unfortunately the Home Office are not keen on providing us with any further guidance, so we think that what will happen over time is forces will likely be JR'd, and from that we will then know what the scope of certain allowances actually was meant to be. So hopefully Avon and Somerset won't be the first to be a JR, but I would also like to add that Avon and Somerset have actually decided to make decisions, whereas maybe other constabularies haven't, so it could well be a possibility.
And that's how to introduce a national scheme.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Anyway, thank you very much, then. If there are no other questions, we'll note that report. That brings us to the end of the public session of the AGM. So I'd welcome someone proposing that at this stage we exclude the public. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for your attendance and listening to all of that. There will be a test later.
And I look forward to seeing you all at North Somerset Council's meeting.
I think that's a challenge that we may try and take up. Thank you very much indeed.